listening quite a bit to what you've been saying, and I'm fascinated with your depth of knowledge. And I guess for me, as somebody that is Burmese, I'm curious as to what sparked your interest into going to our country to learn more. I mean, as you said, you knew of her prior to the Nobel Peace Prize. My thing with, especially as an actor, I would say 75% of the people that I had met prior to this coup had never heard of Burma, you know, and it's unfortunate that now it's at a global, like everyone knows it, but it's for this. It's so heartbreaking, you know, and so as someone, yeah, it's very interesting.
Well, it's a beautiful question, and I feel honored that you would ask it. Please interrupt at any time. I'm in a bookstore in Florida, 1971 to. I was into yoga, painting, art. I had left university. I was into spirituality, and I picked up a book on meditation by the late Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw, one of the great Buddhist teachers in Myanmar, one of the two leaders of the Sixth Buddhist Council in Rangoon in the 50s. And I went, wow, mindfulness meditation, Satipatthana Vipassana meditation. How practical, how compelling. And there was something in me that wanted to meet this man and practice this meditation. And make a long story short, I didn't want to meet a descendant of him, I wanted to meet him. That led me from there to eventually to India, to going to Burma in 1977 on a on a 7-day limited visa without extension under Ne Win, the dictator, and myself and a group of other people, all of whom were interested in Buddhist meditation from him, found him up in his home village in the north. And I asked him if I could learn meditation from him and ordain as a monk. And he said, no, we're under dictatorship. 2 years later, I'm back in Los Angeles, just up the street from here. And because we couldn't go back to Burma, we invited him here. 2 retreats, one here in California, one in New York. On the final day, in May of 1979, I said, sir, I want to go back to Burma with you. Is it possible? He said, you know it's a dictatorship, only a 7-day visa. But if you want to ordain, which will be to your best interest, we'll do all that we can to see if we can petition the regime to see if they'll extend your visa. It's up and done, but let's give it a go. And so I went back with him the next day and flew to Burma in May of 1979. And on the 7th day of my 7 days, they extended it, and they extended my visa. And so from that point on, I continued to renew it, and I began to learn Dhamma, meditation. I met the former Prime Minister U Nu. I met U Tien Nu, the former general, when he was released from prison under Ne Win. I became, wow, these are very unusual connections. U Tien Nu, the former general in the Ne Win, introduced me to the psychology of dictatorship. I really didn't know much about that when he was released from prison after 6 years. So, jump time, I learned the language. I was the first, they say the first American in modern times to be in the monastery, one of the first Westerners in modern times. And I was right in the epicenter of where the former elected leaders like U Nu, he started the monastery with Sir U Twin, where I lived. And it was like, these were the arch enemies of Ne Win, the dictator. And here I was, as white Westerner learning Burmese. I think they thought I was CIA. So they threw me out 3 times, and I eventually came back in. 88, blew the mind of the world, the year before Tiananmen Square. And because of the level of murder that went down in August and September of 88, because the people, the nuns and monks, were my family, I just felt this instinct, Priscilla, to go back into the country. There was no visa, so I went in underground. There was no act of heroic. I just wanted to be with friends and family and see if they were okay. From that, I walked into human rights violation that I'd never seen in the world. And I then went out to Karen State, where the elected leaders in 1990 fled, very similar to today. Dr. Sein Win, the Prime Minister, his elected cabinet, and I met them in Manipur, in Karen State. I met all the members of the ABSDF, and I went, wow, nonviolence, violence, underground, and then I was escorted into the front areas of the ethnic cleansing that went on out then with the Burmese military, with the Karens. And I didn't plan on it, but when I left, that's when Newsweek, Time magazine, and publishers asked if I would write about it, which I didn't really want to. And it was the first book I wrote in 1990 called Burma, the Next Killing Fields, based upon my 2 months underground in Burma and then 3 or 4 months out in the Karen area in Shan. And tragically immersed, sadly, in this ethnic cleansing from the Burmese military to the Karens. Dalai Lama wrote a foreword, and I just felt compelled to speak up. These were my family. Then when they attacked the monasteries, 270 monasteries were attacked by Kin Yunt and Tam Shui or Ne Win, and then that was like, what? What? And then the monks began to protest, the nuns began to protest. I said, this is my family. I went back again. I went like that, just my heart was breaking. And in 91, there was Daw Suu won the prize. Yay! But the country was closed. We were all in pain. And then I was in 95 again underground with Daw Suu, 96, thrown out, banned. For 17 years I was banned as a public enemy. And I became involved in supporting not really Daw Suu or the people, but the principles they stood for as well as them too. I've just not seen nonviolence like this confront evil ever in the world. And so it played right into my dharma, right into my revolutionary activism. I met poets, I met U Parle, the great spoken word artist at Daw Suu's house, the great satirist who spent so many years in prison. I went from lecturer to solo performer on a stage called Spiritually Incorrect, donated all the income that came to our nonprofit to support the people, the Burma Project USA, and then banned 17 years, and then I saw Daw Suu when she was released in San Francisco in 2012 for the first time. We spoke in 17 years. I told her I've been unbanned by Ting Sein, and she said the only way to test it, if you would, come back and continue your support for our people. And so I went back in about 40 times in the last 8.5 years. And my only duty, my only interest to end the story was, I'm irrelevant, it's stating the obvious. It's your people. And the people there, I said, in your words, tell the truth. And that's all I provided, like you're providing for me right now. I talked to so many of these people, some known, some unknown, some Christian, teachers, ethnic groups, former monks, great revolutionary leaders who in 10, 20 years in solitary. What is it like? How do you survive? Where do you maintain your dignity? How do you keep freedom alive? It's hard for you to communicate, but your people throughout the country, the ones that are not known, the quality of their ethical, spiritual, biblical, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist courage is epic. When you go deeper into what's gone down, I've never seen in my life a family of people so remarkably committed to things that I would aspire that my children, my daughter, that I would like to see inherited on this planet. I've never seen it. And I'm sure it's been around. But Burma to me is family. And so I don't feel like I'm an activist. I don't feel like I'm overly passionate about it. I just feel deeply connected to the gift of what I've been given by association and overtly by your people. I mean, I would travel the country and be brought into people's homes, you know this, and just treated like family. Where do you see that in the world? Where do you see that? And you see it all over the country. They're so forgiving, so tolerant. I don't know, I'm just very biased, but I've not seen anywhere on the planet, anywhere remotely as beautiful as the people in the country of Burma. So that's the nutshell of it. I've written books about it. Instinct for Freedom is a memoir about my time in Burma. Of course, The Voice of Hope with Dasu, U Win Chin, U Tinu, U Chimong, in these 4 volumes. That's it. You know, I'm a little bit surprised that people haven't really understood or gotten the cool, the spiritual depth, the hipness, the diversity, especially the ethical, spiritual courage of the people. That I don't see it among. I don't like to compare, but I feel it is so epic. And I try to do in my work, talk to me, if you will. How did you learn that? How did you keep those principles alive when you're being tortured away from your family? And that was the reason I documented the work with the people. And someone can do the same. You're doing the same thing with the country right now. So that's a little bit of my story. But my story, again, I want to emphasize, is completely irrelevant to really the people. One last thing, if I can, which is, I want to emphasize this point for you. Very few people know in the world Sayadaw U Pandita, Dasu, spiritual advisor, meditation teacher, pretty much the principal architect of the concept of the Dharma or the Dhamma of reconciliation. In a way, he was the mindful spiritual intelligence providing dialogue with many of the leaders, along with Dasu, on how do you restrain from evil? How do you restrain from vilification? How do you restrain from demonizing someone who's harmed you and raped your family? That dialogue I've had with Sayadaw U Pandita in a book called Wisdom for the World, Mindful Advice for the People of My Country. And it's included in our books, Burma's Voices of Freedom. That little book is the spiritual teacher of Nelson Mandela, of Martin Luther King, of Gandhi, of Dasu. That's why Burma matters. Because killing and harming and guns is so outmoded. Gen Z knows that, Gen X knows that, hip people know that, Dasu knows that, U Pandita knows that, and that's why Burma matters, because it's the only place in the world that I've seen where reconciliation was the spiritual edge of the revolution. Not forgiveness, but reconciliation. First with one's own fear, greed, and delusion, and also with the enemy. She's not even asking for a truth council. Let's just work it out together and take it higher. That's Burma. In Ming Online, I don't speak the language of reconciliation. All I know is Ne Win Tan Shui indoctrinated me in his evil. Please help me. I wrote this book under lockdown, called Extinction X-Rated. Everything I've said about Burma is in the book. It's like, how do you remove the evil gene from a violent person without violence? I have 270 pages. I attempted a dialogue about that. And that's why Burma matters, because the future of life is at stake. And the people of Burma, and the civilian government, they have no natural enemies, ultimately. What went down in Rakhine State was ARSA. It was a terrorist organization funded by bin Laden's people in Karachi, the CIA, and everyone knows that. It's in our books. Kofi Annan, a year he was commissioned to bring the people to Rakhine to study the circumstances. Dasu commissioned that. The day before he was to release his report, ARSA, the terrorist organization in Rakhine State attacked 30 military installations. No one talks about that. If that was done in America, there would be no more whatever country they came from. It would be a complete nuclear holocaust in that country. And so I don't condone the so-called military clearance operation, but that story of what went down there is not well known and certainly not well represented in the media. In Burma's Voices of Freedom, it is brilliantly documented by primarily my colleague Fergus Harlow in his incredible chronology in Volume 4, and also in the interviews that I've done with other leading figures in modern times. I've recommended the United Nations, you cannot understand the situation sufficiently unless you've read these books. President Biden, anyone in the EU will not understand Dasu or the circumstances in Burma unless you've read these books. So those, Burma matters because I think if we were to get it right in Burma, which I think Dasu and the people are trying, we've got a role model for global peace. She just can't kill your way out of this world. It'll take the whole world down, and we're just already at the precipice. That's why I called it Extinction X-rated. We're already possibly over the cliff. We might be squabbling a little bit about who did this and what, but we're in a complete environmental collapse, economic collapse. The fiat is going to tank. Cryptocurrency may be the only survival. Democracy is almost dead. Xi Jinping and totalitarianism is on the march. The oligarchs in Wall Street and Silicon Valley want to own your mind. Like, swipe, and never think again. Social dilemma times 1,000. You guys get that. We don't want to be part of your mind control. We don't need your education. The Pink Floyd song. We don't want your mind control. Burma is, Dasu is like, she's hip to that. You guys get hip to that, decode that narrative. So anyway, that's my rave.